What's up everyone, Izito here. Great to have you back on the channel. So in today's video, we are surgically dissecting a class pad that has been generating a massive amount of hype lately. People are hunting this thing down, not just because of its highly limited production run, but because of the promises surrounding its surface texture and premium coating. Now, plus, this is the very first time two standalone powerhouses in the class pad market have joined forces. So we need to see if a dual brand collaboration actually translates to top tier performance. Yes, I'm talking about the UnclePanda and Dysphoria collaboration, JinLiu. This is a genuinely special collab, so without any further ado, let's roll the intro and get straight into it. First, let's start with the packaging and my overall unboxing experience. To be completely honest, it's nothing mind-blowing, but don't take that as a negative. It's simply the golden standard for shipping premium class nowadays. The pad arrives in a heavy-duty outer cardboard box, though funny story, my outer box actually had a hilarious typo on it. It spelled performance as performance. A minor quality control slip on the cardboard, but it gave me a good laugh. Once you open that outer shell, you get to the actual main product box. The mechanism is pretty basic but clean. A single side flap secured by a magnetic strip that snaps into the side wall. Inside it threw in a few extras. First up is a metal card. It's beautifully engraved, has a really nice heft to it, and the details feel incredibly sharp and premium in the hand. Next, you get a microfiber cloth. It's thick, substantial, but feels a bit stiff. It actually reminds me a lot of the wallhack cloth rather than the thin, lightweight ones you get from Abyss Gaming or those large foldable towers from standard Dysphoria or Koku drops. Lastly, they included a package of aftermarket mouse gates, specifically a control-oriented set. I gave them a quick run, but personally, they weren't really my cup of tea. Moving on, let's look at the physical blueprint of the pad, starting with the dimensions. Standard class pads usually sit at a flat 500 by 450mm, but the JinLiu opts for the 490 by 420mm form factor. It shares the exact same footprint as the Yanpo, but the design language deviates heavily when it comes to the corner. Instead of keeping a tighter, more traditional right-angle corner that softly rounds off at the very tip like the Yanpo, the JinLiu features much wider, more aggressively rounded corners at all 4 points. Now, as for the thickness, it measures in at a true 2.8mm. This perfectly aligns with the official spec sheet, a 2mm glass slab sitting on top of a 0.8mm base layer. It's not doing anything revolutionary here. It's not ultra thin on the 2mm mark, nor is it a massive 3mm brick. It's just a solid, well-proportioned thickness that gets the job done. Flipping the pad over, we see a design language that unmistakably Dysphoria. The entire underside is covered in a gray checkerboard texture pattern with the prominent Dysphoria logo sitting dead center. This specific base design is signature element for them, and man, it absolutely delivers on its purpose. The desk adhesion is phenomenal. Whether I was hitting aggressive high velocity flick or dealing with sudden chaotic tracking adjustments in games like Marvel Rivals, the pad did not budge a single millimeter. Pure stability. Okay, now let's talk about the edge beveling. Look, a 2.5D rounded edge is basically the industry baseline for a class pad at this point, so there's no reinventing the wheel here, but if I compare it directly to the Yanpo, you can clearly feel the difference, even though they are both technically 2.5D, the JinLiu's beveling isn't as low or gradual. Instead, the slope is longer and noticeably steeper. It has that abrupt edge drop-off identical to the Dysphoria Ring, which confirms this is a deliberate design choice from the Dysphoria side of the collab. Now, to give you some context, as of right now, the Mitsuki Koku still holds the crown for the most comfortable edge profile on the market. They engineered a much more gradual, seamless slope that feels incredibly forgiving on your arm. Switching back to an edge that is this abrupt just doesn't feel as comfortable to me. Now, if you anchor your pad right at the edge of your desk and your forearm doesn't cross the boundary, this is a non-issue. But because I tend to position my pad toward the middle of the desk and rest my entire forearm across it, this is a distinct point of friction for me personally. Let's dive into the core of this review, the surface of visual and execution. Looking through the glass, the printed artwork has a slight, deliberate matte look to it. The micro texture and the coating on this glass slab are highly prominent, while certain high contrast details in the background pop out a bit more. The overall presentation has a distinct matte finish across the board. In the bottom left corner, you will find the official UnclePanda and Dysphoria collaboration logo, which looks incredibly clean and well executed. Color-wise, the palette dominates with white, deep blues, purples, hints of blacks, and soft light blue accents. Visually, it's undeniably striking, the composition is highly eye-catching, and honestly, give me strong vibes of the Mitsuki Koku print. Now, let's talk about the actual surface performance. This is where I spend the vast majority of my testing hours, and I want to break down this as objectively as possible. If you are looking to hoard a massive collection of glass surfaces and you strictly care about velocity, this pad sits firmly in the high-speed tier, roughly an 8 out of 10. It isn't the absolute fastest pad on Earth. In terms of sheer speed, it outpaces the Seiyo, the Rin, but it sits a step behind the Mitsuki Koku, the Yanpo, and the Rio. If you are buying this purely for the historical value of the collab and its limited edition status, well, it's an incredibly well-rounded package. You get a high tier speed, exclusivity, clean print quality, and dual branding. But let me give you a much deeper, more technical breakdown of what the surface actually feels like under your fingertip. The proprietary coating they used here feels exceptionally smooth and fluid under the hand. It almost tricks your brain into forgetting that this is technically a textured, tactile surface designed with microparticles to reduce dynamic friction. So when I run my fingertips directly across the glass to really gauge the texture, it doesn't give off that heavy grainy feedback you get on the Rin. It also doesn't have that incredibly subtle microscopic texture of the Koku, and it definitely steers clear of the glossy, silky smooth surface finish of the Yanpo. It occupies its own unique subcategory because in terms of sheer tactile smoothness, it actually feels somewhat smoother than the Yanpo. And if your hands stay perfectly dry, skin stickiness won't be an issue. However, because I live in a hot, humid climate, which means I'm practically forced to wear an arm sleeve at all times to maintain a consistent glide. Furthermore, and this is a major caveat, the surface has a severe compatibility issue with G-Wolf sensors. I haven't fully traced the root yet, but both my Fenrir Asim and Fenrir Bro suffered from consistent sensor spin-out. Every time I executed a high-velocity swipe, the sensor tracking would abruptly cut out. I tried adjusting the lift-off distance across the entire spectrum from the lowest to the absolute highest values, and I ensured the firmware was completely up to date, but nothing fixed it. It turns out the community rumors were accurate. This specific micro texture is highly hostile toward G-Wolf sensor implementation, and keep that in mind if that's your main mouse. So when it comes to pure velocity and friction dynamics, it is indeed faster than the Rin and also the Seiyo, even if only by a slight margin. But since I've spent significant time on the Koku, the speed bracket feels highly controllable for me. One thing to note, this surface offers virtually zero downward stopping power. I cycled through multiple skate compound over the last 2 weeks, and pushing down on the mouse to create friction yields almost no structural deceleration. But given that the pad isn't blindingly fast, having minimal downward stopping power actually feels fine. Personally, I absolutely despise glass surfaces that feature coarse microparticles but suffer from high dynamic friction from the moment you apply downward pressure. I prefer a glass pad to be ultra smooth, fast, and completely devoid of artificial stopping power, so it can constantly challenge your raw and mechanical, but at the same time is really consistent. The JinLiu executes this perfectly, and I'm highly satisfied with how the glide feels. Now, as for the acoustic profile, this pad is loud, yes. It doesn't quite match the high-pitched clatter of the Koku, and it's a fraction quieter than the Ring, but make no mistake, it will generate a very noticeable acoustic signature during heavy gaming sessions. So, wrapping things up, where does the UnclePanda and Dysphoria JinLiu actually stand? Look, it's a genuinely solid product. If you love limited edition hardware, appreciate a well-built piece of kit that holds excellent collector value, and want a glide that sits safely above average speed, this pad is a fantastic acquisition. It checks a ton of boxes simultaneously. However, if you're like me, someone who is perpetually chasing pure unadulterated speed and boundary-pushing performance, the JinLiu might feel a bit too safe. It doesn't necessarily deliver that jaw-dropping, revolutionary breakthrough I was hoping for, but let's credit where the credit is due. It's premium, rock-solid release, the artwork is gorgeous, and the speed sits comfortably in the upper tiers. The form factor is highly usable, though I secretly wish they offered a slightly larger variant, and the overall build is top tier. The premium coating is exceptionally smooth to the touch, giving you an instant sense of quality the moment you unbox it. It's a stellar marker for what happens when two prominent names in the scene collaborate. And that pretty much covers it for the JinLiu. Thank you all so much for watching, for constantly supporting this channel, and for all the incredible feedback you guys drop in the comments. I appreciate every single one of you, honestly. And until the next one, Zido's out. Peace.